Finding a hole in the market and filling it has always been a philosophy of mine. For example, my son Rick Harrison just dropped a bombshell. He says Chumlee messed up so badly that his life is now ruined. The once thriving pawn shop, which was full of rare items and big deals, is now flooded with lawsuits, betrayals, and scandals. Could this be the moment that finally destroys everything Richard Old Man Harrison built? Tune in, because the disaster, we will. The pawn shop that built an empire, the gold and silver pawn shop, began small, but quickly became a hit under Rick Harrison's leadership. It was once a thriving empire, but after Old Man Harrison died in 2018, things started to fall apart. Rick took over, but without his father's advice, the family started to fall apart. Running a business is one thing, but keeping a family together was a whole other challenge, and Rick was the shop, lost that battle, and just when it looked like it could handle anything, someone betrayed it. But what Chumlee did next surprised everyone, and Rick's reaction changed everything for good. Pawn Stars came out on TV in 2009, and viewers couldn't get enough of it. The idea was simple. Customers brought in old, rare, or valuable items, and Harrison decided if they were worth buying. Fans loved the mix of history, business, and humor. Oh yeah, because my dad is in Vietnam and my mom is trying to sell real estate on the side. We have a house, but we're moving my aunt and her kids in because my uncle is in Vietnam just to pay the rent. Then there was Chumlee, the goofy, lovable worker who quickly became a fan favorite. But behind the jokes and smiles, real trouble was brewing, and it was worse than anyone could have imagined. The first big problem was a lawsuit between the shop's owner and his own mother, Joanne Harrison. She said he cheated her out of her fair share of the business. When she woke up from AA in the early 2000s, he allegedly made her sign away 51% of the pawn shop's ownership, which she has regretted ever since. When Richard Harrison died, Joanne was supposed to inherit his 49% share, but the paperwork was never handed over. Things got even more complicated when she said that over $500,000 in cash and silver had disappeared without a clear explanation. The lawsuit quickly turned nasty, with Joanne demanding her fair share and even a restraining order against her own son, who fought back, saying she was being manipulated by outsiders. What started as a family dispute turned into a full-on war, and the damage was too great to fix. As if things weren't bad enough, the business started to fall apart. The pandemic hit hard, and the shop's profits dropped sharply. In 2012, it barely made $37,000. But the financial losses were nothing compared to the personal tragedies going on behind the scenes. And then there was, for years, Chumlee played the clueless worker who made stupid mistakes but always kept his job. But behind the scenes, things were very different. In 2012, he was caught on camera in a street fight, and that was just the start. 4 years later, in 2016, police raided his house during an assault investigation. If you don't do drugs, get a good education, and don't have kids outside of marriage, your chances of being poor drop by 95%. What they found was shocking: methamphetamine, marijuana, and illegal drugs and guns. He ended up paying over $330,000 in fines and legal fees just to stay out of jail. His reputation never got better, and even though he tried to hide, the damage was already done. Corey Bigos Harrison wasn't much better. He had his own share of problems, starting with an incident at a bar while on a motorcycle trip. Things got out of hand, and before anyone knew it, Corey was peeing in public and throwing bar stools. He was kicked out right away, and that wasn't the... In the beginning, he got caught up in a nasty case over a rented Corey and his assistant were accused of damaging a recreational vehicle and refusing to pay for the repairs. The owner said the RV was returned completely trashed, full of bottles and other junk, with an estimated damage cost of $3,000. Corey denied everything, but the legal battle that followed was yet another stain on the Pawn Stars' reputation. The scandals didn't just affect the main cast. The show relied on so-called experts to judge rare items, and even some of them were caught lying about appraisals to make deals look better on camera. And some even had personal interests at play by driving up prices to make more money for themselves. Viewers who used to trust the show started to doubt everything, and faith in the Pawn Stars brand began to fade. The shop had been through a lot of family fights, bad decisions, and lost money, but things were only getting worse thanks to the experts who lied to everyone. Pawn Stars had its good times, but let's be honest, things went in a bad direction. It was supposed to be about cool fins and crazy valuable antiques, but when you peel back the layers, it's less about history and more about scandal, bad deals, and even fraud. The so-called experts were not so expert after all. Johnny Jimenez Jr., an expert on toys, went to jail on domestic violence charges, and John Resnikoff, who was supposed to be an expert on signatures, was caught misidentifying an autograph. That should have been enough to set off alarm bells, but then there was Drew Max, the ultimate blow. He claimed to be an expert in sports memorabilia, but turned out to be a complete fraud. He used his fame from TV to trick people into buying fake collectibles. Imagine trusting a guy from TV only to find out your prized sports item was worthless. Fans began to wonder if the whole show was a scam. Then Olivia Black came along in 2012 and quickly became a fan favorite. She was funny and added new energy to the cast, but one day she was just gone. What happened to her? Pictures from her past showed up online, and right away she was fired by the producers without any discussion or hesitation. Fans were furious. She wasn't even from the pawn shop because she was on the show. She said, "It's teaching me how to work with people in general." It was clear that Pawn Stars didn't want to be involved in a scandal even though they were already overwhelmed with them. Olivia took matters into her own hands. She turned her hands to modeling and adult entertainment, refusing to let the show define her. That's great for her, but the hits kept coming. The pawn shop was at the center of a major theft scandal when a man said his niece stole his $50,000 collection of antique coins and sold them to Gold and Silver Pawn. When he realized what had happened, he tried to get the coins back, but was too late. The shop said they couldn't identify them and had probably melted them down. His collection was gone. Imagine collecting something valuable for years only to lose it overnight. The worst part is that the pawn shop got away with it with no accountability, no refunds, nothing. It was just another day in the world of Pawn Stars. Even the show's star, Rick Harrison, failed. He tried to expand his empire beyond the pawn shop with Pawn Plaza, a shopping center with shops and restaurants. He thought it would be a huge success because of how popular the show was, but it failed miserably. Hard shop owners said he didn't promote it enough, businesses shut down, and he was sued for another failed experiment and another mess. Let's talk about the show itself. Remember when it felt real? When people would come in with weird things and you'd learn something new? Those days are long gone. Fans started to notice that everything felt scripted. I'm really sick all the time. There's only one TV in the house, and I remember that this is 1973. There are 3 TV stations. There isn't much for kids to watch during the day, so the fights, deals, and random customers were all staged. What started out as a fun new look at pawn shop culture had turned into just another reality TV disaster. By the time the 21st season aired, the magic was gone, ratings dropped, and fans stopped watching. The show that was once about history and hidden treasures had turned into a scripted scandal. WR didn't mess, but just when it looked like they had hit rock bottom, something unexpected happened. A rare find that could change everything. Chumlee, of all people, found something amazing while running some boring errands for the shop. It was a bike, but not just any bike. It was sitting in a driveway shining like a prize. It was a space lander. Chumlee wasn't an expert on a lot of things, but even he knew this was something big. He had only seen pictures of them maybe once in a museum, so he had to check it out. The owner wasn't just some guy with an old bike. He had kept this treasure in almost perfect condition since he got it as a Christmas present in the early 1960s and didn't want to part with it. It's not surprising since there aren't many of these left in the world. Designed by a former Tucker automobile engineer, only about 80 were ever made, and most ended up in basements or were scrapped because no major bike companies wanted to mass produce them. Chumlee knew he had to be careful, but he also knew this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once-in-a-lifetime chance. Just when it looked like the show had nothing more exciting to offer, something rare showed up and changed everything. The deal that made Chumlee famous. The owner offered a huge $20,000, which was a lot of money for a bike, even a rare one. Chumlee wasn't going to give up that much money without a fight, so he set his sights low and offered $7,400. The seller wouldn't budge, and after some classic Pawn Stars haggling, they finally agreed on $8,700, which wasn't cheap, but still a steal for something so rare. Getting Rick on board was hard because Chumlee had just spent a lot of money on a bike and no one knew how Rick would react. As expected, Rick wasn't happy when he heard how much had been spent, but when he saw the bike, his mood changed. This wasn't just another forgotten rusty bike left to rot in a basement. It was a space lander, one of the rarest bikes ever made, and most people would never even get the chance to see one in person. It had its original paint and parts had been stored perfectly. For decades, serious collectors had been dreaming of one day finding Rick being Rick. But first, he had to know the numbers. What was the market saying? How much could they sell it for? Chumlee, for all his quirks, knew his stuff when it came to these bikes. He had done his research. These things could go anywhere from $12,000 to $20,000. How Rick would react to my $8,700 guess is anyone's guess. But there's one in the Smithsonian that has to be worth some money, maybe even more if it was the right kind. As close to perfect as it got, but then the plot twist happened. Rick didn't complain like usual. Instead, he did something that no one saw coming. He gave Chumlee a bonus of $1,000 in $100 bills. It turned out that Rick had been watching Chum's hard work in this deal. It was the last piece that sealed the deal, and the guy had earned it. Now, a responsible person might ask, what does someone like Chumlee do with $1,000? Rather than saving money or investing it in something smart, Chumlee had one plan in mind: gold teeth on a fully customized gold grill. As soon as he saw the bills, he could picture himself flashing that golden smile. Rick shook his head and tried to talk sense into him by suggesting Apple stock, Google stock, or something else with real long-term value. But Chumlee wasn't interested in the future. To him, gold teeth were the best investment there was. Afterwards, he went straight to the jeweler, picturing diamonds sparkling in his new flashy grin. But let's go back a bit, because this whole thing began with that bike. The Spacelander was not only rare, it was history. It was a one-of-a-kind creation from the late 1950s, created by an engineer who thought he could change the bicycle industry forever. This person had worked on Tucker cars, so he knew innovation. And he had a vision. He built around 80 Schwinn spread, these bikes all over the US and even some parts of Europe, in the hopes that someone with money would buy one. It didn't work out, though, because big brands took one look at his futuristic design and didn't bother with it. It kind of ruined my honeymoon, which is why I was there. I was more excited about the bike than the honeymoon, but most people weren't ready for a bike that looked like it came straight out of a science fiction movie, were thrown away or put away in storage rooms until someone realized how valuable they were. This one, however, had survived in perfect condition, a true relic of a failed dream. The frame was made of fiberglass, which was unheard of for a bicycle at the time. The design's sleek, smooth curves made it look like something from another world, and the battery-powered lights built directly into the frame were decades ahead of their time. Everything about it screamed innovation, which was probably its downfall. The person who owned this bike for over 50 years knew exactly what they had and took great care of it. There were no changes made to it, not even a scratch from being left outside in bad weather. It was a museum piece that people would fight over, but it had been sitting in a garage untouched for years, waiting for the right time to be noticed. Rick knew this wasn't a casual buy. He was putting down a lot of money, nearly $99,000 for something that might take a while to sell, but he knew what collectors are like. When the right one sees people who really want what they want are willing to pay whatever it took to get their hands on something this rare. Sometimes deals went well, but when it came to an old car and too much excitement, things usually went badly. When Rick bet big on a rare piece of history, like a Spacelander, there were only a few left, and every time one went on the market, it sold just as quickly. This wasn't a random bet. Rick didn't throw money around without thinking it through. He was willing to give Chumlee that much money, and even a bonus, which meant one thing. He was sure this was the right move. Over the years, the shop has made a lot of questionable purchases. Some deals have become legends, others have made headlines, and still others have made people question everything. But this was different, it was rare, and it was a chance to turn a piece of history into a serious profit. Some purchases become legends, others just leave people scratching their heads, but when it comes to making the big moves, when it comes to making strange purchases, there is one person who always comes through. This time it was an old Buick Regal that he had to have for some reason no one could understand. The car came into the store looking like it had been pulled straight out of the past, with neon paint that screamed bad decisions. The owner, who was trying to get rid of his treasure, said it was a great example of American luxury. But let's be honest, this thing is a mess. The person selling it had a growing collection and thought it was time to get rid of some things. He wanted at least $2,500, but was ready to take $2,000 if that was what it took. Here's the problem. Just because you spend a lot of money on an old car doesn't mean you've made it valuable. Making a lot of changes doesn't magically make it more valuable, and this Regal was proof of that. It had a new engine, a flashy interior, and some custom wheels, but they weren't. The car was still an old sedan stuck in the past. Then there was the moment that threw the deal into chaos. The store's most impulsive buyer looked at the car and couldn't help but fall in love with it. Instead of keeping his cool, he went all out and started gushing over it. This was exactly what the seller wanted, someone who was sold before negotiations even began, so he offered $2,500 for it, even though it wasn't worth even half that much. People love to customize their cars. Paid a lot of money for fancy wheels and paint jobs, but the counter offer was $11,000, which is when things got interesting. The seller, who was clearly in denial, said that the tires alone were worth $111,000. Yes, $11,000. He insisted that he couldn't go lower than $2,000, and instead of walking away, the buyer gave in. With that, a decades-old car that belonged in a scrapyard found a new home, and the deal was sealed. The money pit was officially open, and the next stop was a custom car. More money was about to be wasted at an auto shop that was known for making bad ideas look a little less bad. Back at the store, the rest of the staff knew exactly where this was going because their coworker couldn't stop spending money on useless purchases. A few days later, he strutted back in, full of excitement, ready to show off his masterpiece. The reaction was shock and disbelief. No one was impressed. The store owner, who had seen many financial disasters, couldn't believe $2,000 had been spent on a car. Unfortunately, that was just the start of this disaster. Another $333,000 had been spent on the car, bringing the total amount invested to $55,000. What did all that money buy him? A car that could now bounce up and down. Yes, adding hydraulics to make it move like a toy was the big upgrade. If there was a book on questionable spending, this move would be on the cover. The store owner could only shake his head in defeat, while the oldest employee, who was known for being brutally honest, made it clear that this was the silliest thing he had ever seen. But the new owner of the car didn't seem to care at all. He gleefully demonstrated the bouncing feature as if he had just won the lottery, and he even offered to give his unimpressed coworker a ride, but she turned him down with a single glare. Do you think Chumlee is truly beyond saving, or is there still hope for redemption despite Rick Harrison's shocking claims? Let us know what you think, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more.